Yo, what's going on, everyone? Andrew here. All right, so if you're a defense contractor, you really need to understand CMMC. That includes both defense contractors that are actively working contracts for the DoD, as well as those who want to eventually do some contracts with the DoD. Hey, you really need to understand CMMC. So basically, the Department of Defense is taking cybersecurity seriously now. We always say, hey, yeah, we need to take cybersecurity seriously. We need to do something about it. Well, now they're about it. All right, so if you handle any controlled and classified information, PII, PHI, anything like that, this affects you as well. All right, so once again, I'm Andrew Chandler. I've been working with NIST cybersecurity compliance for the better part of a decade. I've supported federal and state governments in their information system security compliance, as well as performing assessments for them. All right, so breaking this all down, CMMC is a significant shift in how the DoD has always approached supply chain cybersecurity, and it's going to affect everyone. All right, so today we're going to cover pretty much everything you need to know about CMMC, or at least walk you through what CMMC is. Some things we'll cover: the rules, which are like CFRs, Code of Federal Regulations, system scoping, the assessment process, as well as some practical implementation validation guidance. So basically some guidance on making sure that, hey, you're doing this right, or at least give you some steps to determine where it is that you stand with this whole CMMC thing. By the end of the video, the goal is for you to have a better understanding of what CMMC is and how it applies to your organization. All right, so what exactly is CMMC? CMMC stands for the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. In my eyes, it's a compliance framework, but basically it's a set of requirements designed to protect sensitive, unclassified information in the defense supply chain. So basically, just like you have regular contractual requirements for whatever it is that you're producing for the DoD, this is a set of requirements that you'll have to meet prior to contract award. All right, so why does CMMC exist? The DoD developed this because the traditional meaning old version of cyber compliance, it wasn't working. There were many data breaches that were reported, and some that may or likely have not been reported. I just want to come together and balance out and really take a focused effort on improving our cybersecurity posture of not just the DoD itself, but as well as the supply chain that supports all the cool things the DoD does. All right, CMMC is broken down into 3 different levels. The levels are dependent on the classification of information your system has. But this isn't like top secret information. This would be like federal contract information or controlled and classified information. That's pretty much what CMMC covers. All the other levels are covered by other frameworks and other requirements. But anyway, CMMC covers 3 levels. Level 1, it covers your basic cyber hygiene. There's 17 controls, and they're pulled from FAR 52.204-21. Level 2 implements 110 security requirements, and those requirements are found in NIST SP 800-171. Those were written and designed to protect CUI. And then level 3, they are enhanced controls, and they're pulled from NIST SP 800-172. These are for the most sensitive environments that contain information no higher than CUI. Before we break down the rules, we got to know how we got here, or I think it's important to know how we got here. In 2010, there was an executive order 13556 titled Controlled and Classified Information. And this was written to set consistent information safeguarding and dissemination controls. Basically, the different departments were doing different things for what they considered CUI or controlled information. We'll just call it controlled and classified information. And we needed a standard approach to all of it. It's all using the same label, so let's use the same safeguarding and dissemination controls for it. In 2015, we had DFARS 252.204-7008. This DFAR says that contractors or defense contractors agree to and have implemented the security requirements outlined in NIST SP 800-171. At this time, this was revision 1 of NIST SP 800-171. So it says, hey, yeah, contractors, it was written in contracts, hey, you're supposed to follow this, and they needed to do it. In 2017, there's a new DFARS 252.204-7012. This one had a very specific line item in it. The contractor shall implement NIST SP 800-171 as soon as practical, but not later than December 31st of 2017. So that means, hey, this is a real requirement and you must do it, and there was a hard deadline. As we continue on, the DoD Inspector General reports that, hey, the DIB is not doing it. And DIB stands for the Defense Industrial Base. That's the defense supply chain. Hey, we told them to do this, and we gave them a suspense date to do it, and people were still not complying with this new requirement. So in 2020, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2020 had a very specific appropriation item. So under Title 16, that's Strategic Programs, Cyber, and Intelligence Matters for this specific authorization act. Subtitle C, Cyberspace Related Matters, under Section 1648, Framework to Enhance Cybersecurity of the United States Defense Industrial Base. It was an appropriation line item, and this is what got us to CMMC, and it was later released that same year in November of 2020. Moving on to the rules. So one of the main rules for CMMC comes from 32 CFR Part 170. So CFR stands for the Code of Federal Regulations. This rule was published in the Federal Register in 2024, late 2024, I believe it was like mid-December. It's like a Christmas gift for everyone with this new CFR. So it adds another layer of detail to the assessment approach for CMMC. For CMMC and NIST SP 800-171 Rev 2. Rev 2 is what is written in this CFR. I know people are going to have comments about it. Why Rev 2, not Rev 3, and all these things. Essentially, we have to do something. Right now, Rev 2 is something is better than nothing. And in the future, I'm sure they'll update it to comply with Rev 3. But anyway, that's besides the point. The other main rule is 48 CFR. Under this CFR, there are several parts that are under comment and review. So it's June 2025 now, and it's still under review. No indication as to what the timeline looks like. It's when it's going to be signed and published and become an official rule. But we'll see. Likely here in 2025, we'll see that 48 CFR will be published. The main takeaway of 48 CFR is a specific requirements written in there that says you must have a CMMC certification that's not more than 3 years old. As we go further, we'll learn that, hey, these certifications are only good for 3 years anyway. To break this down a little further, I have a little excerpt from here. So it says contractors are required to maintain a current CMMC certification at the specified level, if required by the statement of work or requirement document throughout the life of the contract, task order, or delivery order. So basically what that means is if you have a 5-year contract, you must have your CMMC certification at the appropriate level prior to contract award. And then during the duration of that contract, you must sustain your CMMC certification. So if you have a 5-year contract and you just got your award, so it's only good for 3 years, at some midpoint during that contract that you've been awarded, you need to make sure that you renew it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be challenging. There's a lot of things that are going to be moving with this. So that's definitely something to make sure of. All right, moving on to the 4 main assessment types that are documented into 32 CFR. We have a level 1 self-assessment. This covers federal contract information. We have a level 2, CMMC level 2 self-assessment. So this is CUI, your 110 controls, but this is a self-assessment performed internally within your organization. Then you have a level 2 third-party certifications, and these were conducted by C3PAOs, which are certified third-party organizations who are assessment organizations who have been certified and approved by Cyber AB to perform level 2 assessments on behalf of the DoD. And then we have level 3 certifications, and these are performed by DIBCAC or DCMA. All right, moving on, CMMC level 1 self-assessments. So the organization must document all your assessment results. You will cover all the requirements set forth in 48 CFR 52.204-21. So those cyber hygiene, these are those 17 controls. You'll document it in SPRS, or the Supplier Performance Risk System, and then you'll sustain these or hold on to these artifacts basically for the next 6 years. And as part of retaining these artifacts, you're going to need to zip them and to get a hash value. And this information is all out on the DoD CIO website. But this is something you need to make sure, because if there is a mismatch, then nobody's going to believe you, and they're going to say, hey, all these certifications you had are void. And that'll be very, very bad. So anyway, another key point for level 1 is these self-assessments must occur on an annual basis, and then you'll submit your results annually into SPRS. No POA&Ms for level 1 if you wanted to read ahead. It saved you that time. Level 2 self-assessments, very similar to the level 1. You document your assessment results yourself. You cover all 110 security requirements outlined in NIST SP 800-171 Rev 2. You upload all that information into SPRS. If you have POA&Ms or you need to create POA&Ms for any deficiencies, POA&Ms are plan of actions and milestones. Basically, You plan out all the steps. It says, hey, this is how I'm going to remediate this. And you have 180 days from the date that you submit. Also, same deal, retain these artifacts for the next 6 years. You'll get a hash and maintain that. Or level 2 assessments, self-assessments are good for 3 years. If you have a conditional certification, so that's 180 days, you must remediate. If you do not remediate in time, then your certification is void and you have no CMMC certification. You kind of have to start this process over again. Level 2 C3PAO certifications. These are your third-party assessors. So same deal as the self-assessment, except for now we're bringing in a third party to assess you. This one's going to be more comprehensive. The assessors are going to cover 3 main things. So they're going to examine all of your documentation and all of your evidence that you provided. They're going to interview your personnel, and then they're probably going to test many things to make sure that the things that you wrote and the things they said actually match what's in practice. So much fun. And then same deal for POA&Ms. You have 180 days to remediate. There is a small 10-day period of time to where the assessors are there, and if there is an identified deficiency, that you may be able to remediate within those 10 days, depending on the level of difficulty. If you can complete it, then cool. Hey, and they can mark it as met, or you satisfy that security requirement, then cool. They'll mark it as met. And if not, then you can just write it up as a poem and remediate yourself on your own time, and then move on. And then you'll have to schedule another C3PAO assessment. Now, the important thing with these third-party assessments is everybody's going to be so busy doing assessments. There are not very many organizations who are certified third-party assessors for CMMC. So be very mindful as you're working towards this. If you're expecting to require a third-party organization to do your assessment, just make sure you're planning ahead. And then also, as before, retain these artifacts for the next 6 years using the hashing instructions that are on the DoD CIO website. Level 3. Okay, so you must achieve a final C3PAO assessment, level 2, but the assessment scope must include everything that is identified for a level 3 assessment scope. And you can find out this information on the DoD CIO website. Under CMMC, they have a level 3 assessment scope guide. And then moving on, so you have to have the full certification for level 2, which means that all 110 security requirements are met, and you have your full certification. And then once you have that final certification for level 2, then you request DCMA, or Defense Contract Management Agency, DIBCAC, within that organization or that department. And DIBCAC stands for Defense Industrial Based Cybersecurity Assessment Center. And they're performing the level 3 assessments on behalf of the DoD. So you must have your level 2 certification to request your level 3 certification. Also, in the sustainment, if you're awarded a contract that requires level 3, you must do your level 2 certification again, and before you can request your level 3 by DIBCAC again. So there's a lot of critical timing and planning involved with sustaining a level 3 certification. So that's just food for thought. POA&Ms. All right, so POA&Ms, I think I touched on this a little bit before. So level 1 self-assessment, no POA&Ms for level 1, none. Level 2. Level 2 self-assessment, you can, both level 2, the self-assessment and C3PAO assessment, you can have POA&Ms. They are limited to POA&Ms that are security requirements that have a 1-point value, except for the system security plan that has no points. But anyway, only 1 point. Anything higher than 1 point cannot be POA&M'd. The additional security requirements that cannot be POA&M'd are as follows. So external connections, public control information, your system security plan. If you don't have this one, then you fail right off the rip, and you don't pass go. You don't go anywhere. You can't do anything without your system security plan. Next up, we have escort visitors, your physical access logs, and manage physical access. So these 6 requirements cannot be POA&M'd at all. And moving on to level 3. So level 3, there are 7 security requirements that cannot be POA&M'd. And this includes Security Operations Center, Cyber Incident Response Team, Threat-Informed Risk Assessment, Supply Chain Risk Response, Supply Chain Risk Plan, Security Solution Rationale, and Specialized Asset Security. So those are all the items that can be POA&M'd. And to wrap up all these rules, so 32 CFR Part 170, so this outlines the requirements and identifies some reference documents for the DIB, or if you are seeking CMMC certification, you definitely want to read 32 CFR Part 170. Basically lays the whole thing out so you understand all the requirements, both from the security requirement phase, but you're going to understand the regulatory requirements for this. And then next up, we have 48 CFR. It's currently in public draft now, so you can take a look at what is propose to help you plan in the future. All right, so let's move on to scoping. The CMMC scoping guide. So this is pretty much one of the most important documents that you'll work with. It's one of the most important activities in this entire CMMC journey. Getting your scope right is the most important thing. If you get your scope wrong, you'll spiral out of control, and then your teams will be working on things that don't matter. Or they'll be missing entire parts of your system that should be in scope that happen to handle CUI or federal contract information. So take your time in the scope and get it right. So the assessment scope is going to include all the assets that can be assessed against security requirements. These will be defined all within your SSP. An idea that I typically share with those who are doing this is, hey, do an Excel document, you do some tabs to document all of your assets and organize them based on your asset types or in asset categories. So these assets, and a CMMC asset or CUI asset is one that processes, stores, or transmits CUI in some manner. It doesn't have to be all three of them, but in some way, shape, or form, CUI will touch it. It also includes assets that provide security functions, such as like SIEM or system information event monitoring type of tool. You also want to include system architecture design as well as a boundary. So like some dotted lines around to, hey, identifying specifically, this is where the CUI resides. And then you want to make sure you document all of this in your system security plan, which I'll probably refer to as SSP. All right, so the asset categories. So there are 5 kinds of asset categories. So you have CUI assets, your security protection assets, contractor risk managed assets, specialized assets, and out of scope assets. All right, so your CUI assets. So these handle CUI or controlled unclassified information directly. Just go through a couple definitions. So process means the asset accesses, edits, generates, and or manipulates the CUI. Store means that CUI resides on the asset, either actively or in rest or at rest. And what that means is it's either in memory, such as your RAM, or it's on your hard drive and stored, or some kind of non-volatile memory stored for use at a later date or later time. And then transmit means that the asset moves from one location to another. By location, we mean from one asset to another. And then CUI assets require an assessment against all applicable CMMC requirements. There are some requirements that may not apply. If a requirement does not apply to an asset, you just want to make sure you document your justification as to why that requirement does not apply to the asset, because that's the first thing inspectors are going to look for. What did you say you don't need to do? And then prove to me why you don't need to do it. So just make sure you write your justifications and your teams understand. Moving on. So all these assets should appear in an asset inventory. That's where I mentioned the Excel document. And you can either include them within your SSP, embedded in the SSP, or as an external document. You just have to make sure they're referenced and provided if you're working with a third-party assessment organization, that you give them everything that they need and everything that's referenced within the SSP. And then you also want to include them in any diagrams that you have in your architecture. So moving on, this is the core of your CMMC assessment scope. It's all of these assets. Next, we have security protection assets. So these provide security functions to your CMMC scoped environment. So this will include your firewalls, your IDS or IPS, such as your intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems. SIEM's talked about that before, and any other tools that you would use to satisfy security protection of all the assets and all the information that you have. Security personnel, which would be any personnel that has roles that supports the use of these tools, they can also be considered security protection assets. And then we have security protection data. So this is data produced by the assets that are protecting your environment. They also are subject to CMMC. So this will include your log files, any configuration data, access credentials, and things like that. So your security protection assets are assessed against the requirements relevant to their functions. So this one you can scope. So take your time, scope these assets well, and so that you're applying the correct security requirements, or you're measuring them against the correct security requirements. And then you'll document this as the same way as you're doing your CUI assets, either in an Excel document or in some way that is very easy to understand within your SSP. Next up, we have the contractor risk managed assets. So these are items that could potentially process CUI, but are not intended to based on policy. They don't require physical or logical separation from CUI assets. They're included in the scope, but limited assessment requirements. So your risk management policies will address these assets. And so basically, if you have a CRMA or a contractor risk managed asset, if only 4 requirements apply to this thing, or like 40 doesn't really matter. Whatever security requirements apply to it, cool, you'll document that. For all those that do not apply, you'll want to have justifications as to why and how, and then that should be supported by the security policies and assessments that are performed by your team. So you just need to make sure you can prove it. All these assets will be documented the same way as your other assets that are in either an Excel document or someplace nice in your SSP. Specialized assets. So these are assets that can process CUI but cannot be fully secured due to some kind of technical limitation. This includes your Internet of Things devices, as well as some operational technology systems. And if you have GFEs or government furnished equipment, so that as well, can't touch it. So you can only do so much there. And test equipment. So they're in scope, but assessed with special considerations. Same deal, just make sure you're documenting which controls you're applying. If they are physical things, and they should have all of their physical security requirements applied to them. They're all going to apply because they'll all be protected in the same way. You want to include this into that your CMMC asset, either matrix as an Excel document or some sort, and then document it and reference within the SSP. Out of scope assets. These are assets that cannot process, store, or transmit CUI, so they must be logically or physically separated from your CUI assets, and they provide no security functions to your CMMC environment. Out of scope assets do not require any documentation. Basically, as you're drawing your designs of your system, both your logical, your physical designs or diagrams, and where I'm talking about, hey, draw your circle, your red dash line circle, or whatever color you want, that scopes your system. That's what's in. If you have any other external connections outside of that, yes, you can mark those and label those, but your out of scope assets, don't put them on there. If you put them on there, people are going to ask questions about them as to what they are, and hey, this could potentially store, and maybe this should be a CRMA, or maybe this should be included in the scope. And to prevent the questions, you want to scope and diagram your environment in a way that showcases where all the CUI information is and where all that data resides. So be very careful with your scoping and your diagramming. External service providers. So these may be in scope if they meet the definition of a CUI asset or security protection asset criteria. Typically might fall under security protection asset. Your external service provider relationships must be documented in the SSP, and these are only external service providers that provide some kind of service related to your CMMC environment. If they are just an external service provider for some other part of your organization, don't include them if they don't touch CUI at all. If they're not doing anything in this environment that you want to get certified, don't write them in. A very important document that you want to have for this is your customer responsibility matrix, or matrices if you have more than one. Basically what this does is it outlines the responsibilities your external service provider has and what you have. These are likely not to be written in a way that easily translates or walks to the CMMC security requirements. So your teams are going to have to take a look and really walk through, hey, how are these defined and how can I match this up? I believe there's an appendix in NIST SP 800-171 that does crosswalk ISO 27001 and NIST SP 853 Rev 4 controls with the security requirements and security controls framework, I believe is what it is. I just know the acronym is SCF and they're red. They also have this gigantic document that kind of translates a lot of these controls as to, hey, these match these security requirements. So definitely take a look. Staff augmentation, that kind of resources, they typically aren't considered ESPs, but they could be considered a security protection asset depending on their role. Cloud service providers. If you're using a cloud service provider, they must meet FedRAMP requirements, and it's a FedRAMP moderate. Hopefully they're certified. If they're certified, then you should be able to request their certification letter, or should be able to find that out, or memos, not letter, but their certification memo, as well as the responsibility matrix. The cool thing is if they have a FedRAMP certification, you should be able to inherit some controls depending on how your scoped environment is designed. Okay, so kind of like wrapping up all this. So in all those categories and everything that we just kind of touched on, your asset inventories, which is all covering all 5 categories, really 4, because you don't want to talk about your out of scope items because it doesn't really apply. It seems silly to talk about that. But anyway, so you want to make sure you document all of this stuff. So your asset categories must be clearly identified. I usually recommend people to use an Excel document or some kind of Google Sheets or whatever to document all these assets and then to tab them out so they have different tabs for the different categories. You want to make it as simple as possible for assessors and your teams, so that everybody knows where to find what instead of trying to just filter on one gigantic sheet. I always found it simpler just to have tabs for the individual categories. But anyway, you only need one SSP. Okay, so only one SSP for this thing. Don't make different SSPs. Doing it the tab way is significantly easier. Make sure your diagrams depict the system as it is designed and it accurately represents your CMMC environment. If you can, you really want to document how the assets are used and how they are connected within that diagram. That'll be super important. So as the assessors or as your teams look at this diagram, they'll be able to understand, hey, okay, I understand where these things are and the functions that they perform. And then all this included in your SSP. Your SSP will be a very gigantic document. It is essentially a living document. So every change that's going to occur, you're going to document it within the SSP. Okay, so the CMMC assessment guide. So this one provides the methodology for evaluating your implementation or how well you meet the security requirements. It's organized by security domains. If you've been doing cyber for a long time or you're doing NIST related cyber stuff, you'll know them as control families. But for CMMC, they're called security domains for whatever reason. Each requirement is broken down further. So you have 110 security requirements, and this is the base. I'm talking about CMMC level 2. So you have 110 security requirements. And within those requirements, you also have assessment objectives and further broken down into like methods and discussion points. This is just to help the reader understand the intent of either the objectives or the entire security requirement. The assessment methodology for CMMC is built on or based on NIST SP 800-171A. A stands for assessment in this. Surprise. And so each requirement has specific assessment objectives and each must be met. And they can be met in one of 3 ways. And so the 3 assessment methods are, so you have examine, interview, and test. And so the assessors will combine the methods as needed to perform a comprehensive evaluation on whether or not you meet the requirement. The assessor's results determine whether or not the requirements are satisfied. Satisfied is a term that's used in NIST SP 800-171A, but for CMMC, we use the term met. It's either met, or not applicable. And if you're reading through NIST SP 800-171A, there are notes in there as to level of rigor. It is important to understand that for CMMC, the level of rigor is focused. So there's 3 levels of rigor. The only one you need to focus on is literally focused. Okay, so assessment methods. I'm going to break this down just a little bit. So examine. So this is just reviewing all of your documentation, any supporting artifacts that are provided, your SSP, anything that is referenced in the SSP, all these supporting documentation there. And then also for each security requirement, you're likely to have either screenshots or additional documentation that supports that you guys are doing the things that are required. Interviews means discussing whatever that security requirement or your implementation with the relevant personnel. So if somebody has a role that's tied to whatever security requirement, they're likely going to get interviewed. And then lastly, we have test. So this is demonstrating that whatever you said you do and or did, you're actually doing. So that one's always fun. Assessors will select the appropriate methods based on the requirement's intent. So most requirements are going to involve multiple methods. If an assessment from a C3PO is performed only doing one, it's extremely unlikely. Be prepared to answer all 3 assessment methods with your team. And as you're performing your own self-assessments, be able to do all 3, examine, interview, and test, because there is the potential for an audit. And if you can't prove that, hey, your team can answer the requirement for all 3, it's going to be a bad time. And so we're all about good times here. Moving on to assessment findings. So there's 3 kinds of assessment findings for CMMC, so specific for CMMC. So you either have met, which is all objectives are satisfied with adequate evidence using a combination of the 3 methods. Not met means one or more of the objectives are not satisfied. And then not applicable means a requirement doesn't apply to your environment. Just make sure you have a strong justification as to why, because you will have to answer to that to the why. And then we have temporary deficiencies. This is a fun area. So temporary deficiency can be approved within approved operational plan. The approved operational plans will be documented and approved within your organization. As the assessors come in, if you have temporary deficiencies, they can be marked as met as long as the assessors concur with the approved operational plan. All right, moving on. So now we're going to walk through the security domains, or if you're a NIST cyber nerd, your control families. Okay, so there are 14 security domains. I'm going to stick with the term security domains for now. 14 domains, and I'm going to talk about them all real quick. Okay, so we have an access control. This manages who can access what in your system. So it covers your user identity, authentication, and authorization. Next up, we have awareness and training. So there's 3 requirements here. This ensures personnel understand their security responsibilities, and it covers general security awareness and role-specific training. Moving on, we have audit and accountability. There are 9 requirements here. This domain tracks and monitors system activities, and it covers audit log creation, protection, and analysis. Next, we have configuration management. There's 9 requirements here. This manages your system configuration. It covers baseline configurations as well as your change management process, such as a CCB. Please do those. Identification and authentication. There are 11 requirements here. This verifies your user and device identities. These are all high level, and it also covers your password management and multi-factor authentication. Incident response. So there are 3 requirements here. This addresses your security incident handling. So it covers your incident detection, reporting, and response procedures. Something super critical to note, I believe in 48 CFR, whenever it's going to be published, as it currently stands, this is June 2025, incident response, I believe is if you suspect you have an incident involving CUI, you must report, I believe, within 8 hours. It's a very, very short time period. So that means it must report, the notifications must go through your organization and to the DoD within hours. Don't quote me on that. I'm going to try to find the right answer for you. But that is something that's very important. And the difference between an event and an incident is event, you think something happened and you must do discovery. An incident means something did happen and you are actively remediating. Those are high level definitions. I'm sure some cyber nerd will correct me. Next up, we have maintenance. There are 6 requirements here. These control your system maintenance activities, and it covers your authorized maintenance and your maintenance tool usage, meaning what is an authorized tool. Media protection, there are 9 requirements here. So this protects your media containing sensitive information. So it could be paper media or digital media. How are you protecting it? Marking, access controls, encryptions, and sanitization of media. Then we have personnel security. So there are 2 requirements here. So this addresses your personnel related security measures, and it covers screening before granting access to CUI assets and or information. Then we have physical protection, 6 requirements here. This covers your physical access to facilities and systems, and it covers your facility access restrictions and monitoring. Then we have risk assessments. There are 3 requirements here. It identifies and manages security risks, and it covers your vulnerability scanning as well as your vulnerability remediations. And last 3. So we have security assessment. There are 4 requirements here. So this evaluates your security control effectiveness, and it covers your ongoing monitoring and evaluation. Then we have system and communications protection. There are 16 requirements here. This protects your system and communications, surprise. And it covers your boundary protections as well as encryption requirements. So like encryption of the data itself and also encryption in transit. System and information integrity, there are 7 requirements here. So this maintains system and information integrity. Surprise again. It covers flaw remediation and malicious code protection. This covered essentially the majority, or at least the security domains of all the 110 security requirements. I did not go into the enhancements that are part of a level 3 assessment. And so to go with all 110 security requirements is about 320 individual security assessment objectives. So it's going to be so much fun, and you're going to love writing about all of them. Yay! Okay, so some assessment planning tips. Prepare all your documentation before the assessment begins. This will be for both your internal self-assessments as well as for your third-party assessors. Make sure you have everything and you can support every security requirement as well as the assessment objectives underneath them. The personnel who are filling roles that support your organization meeting these requirements, make sure they understand what they're doing, do some mock interviews with them, walk through the security requirements with them. Most people don't take the security requirement or the security control mindset first. Make sure you're helping everybody and you're working with them to understand, hey, this is what the requirement's looking for. And so walk through some of the discussion notes as well so that they understand how to answer the question completely. So I always found that to be super helpful. Anyway, understand your assessment scope and boundaries. Yes, get your scope right and be able to explain your scope and defend your scope. If you're working with a third-party assessor, hey, just work with them. They want to help you as much as you want the certification. So just work with them, answer them completely. They're there to do the best that they can for you and also on behalf of the DoD. Moving on to some practical implementation guidance. This is really around validation, helping you figure out the validation part, not actually implementing, because everybody's system's different and everybody uses different tools. Anyway, so here's a general process that I follow for CMMC. So review your current SSP or your system security plan. If you don't have one, you don't do anything else. Go get it. There is a super bare bones system security plan that's on the NIST website under the NIST SP 800-171 Rev 2. So you have to look. It'll take you a minute to find it, but there is a very bare bones version of it. Start there. Start with something so you have an SSP, and then use both the scoping guide and the assessment guide to help you populate and build that document out, because it's very bare bones. You're going to need significantly more information than what is being provided in SSP from NIST. Next, you want to walk through the scoping guide. So you want to make sure you cover all the areas that are identified in the scoping guide, and that'll be all part of the first section of the SSP before you get to the security requirements. All of that stuff will be either put in there, or if you're using any external documents to the SSP, make sure they're referenced in there, and that your external document, whatever it is that you're making, is written completely, and it is understandable by an assessor or those who are not in a similar role as you. So basically, we just want to make sure that everybody can understand what it is that you put together, or what it is that was put together. Make sure you have your logical and physical architecture diagrams. Make sure you have it drawn up, and then make sure you have your boundary. Everybody loves boundaries. So make sure you have your red dash line circle around your environment or whatever it is, or wherever the data is moving. If you just give them a diagram, nobody knows what's supposed to be in or out. So they're going to default to all of it is in, and is there more? Because I don't know what's in and out. And then make sure you have that all in your SSP. After you have those sections done in your SSP, you're going to move to the assessment guide, and then you're going to start working through all of the requirements. So you use the assessment guide, and then also use NIST SP 800-171A. Using both of those to perform your assessment will be super helpful. Basically, you just want to do a gap analysis, an internal gap analysis yourself, and make sure you're going down to the assessment objective level. Don't just do the security requirement, because you cover the majority of what it's kind of talking about. Go down and be able to answer every single assessment objective. And from there, you want to calculate your SPURS score. On the SPURS website, there is a document that itemizes the point values of each security requirement. It was pretty hard to find, but I'm sure you'll find it. And then you want to calculate your SPURS score. Magic number is 88 if you're doing a level 2. So 88, nothing can have 5 points, no 5 points, no 3 points. And then make sure the other items that we discussed before, those 6 items that cannot be POA&M'd, that those are not deficient, and you have scored yourself as met for those. But you just want to know where you currently stand. So do your own gap analysis and baseline where you are. And then from there, you want to start fixing things, obviously. Okay, so now that you know what's wrong, you want to start prioritizing the remediations. So you want to develop realistic implementation timelines. So you prioritize everything, and then you build out your timelines based on your priorities, and then you just start remediating your issues. So you're working with your team, remediating the issues, and also make sure you're documenting all the items that you're updating. So once you've remediated something and it's complete, hey, document, yes, we finished this up. And then within your SSP and all of your other supporting documentation about your system, make sure that's documented there as well. So this is going to take a lot of concentrated effort from the entire team to collectively work together to get you across this line. Wrapping this all up, you should have a good idea of what CMMC is now. So we covered some rules, some system scoping, your assessment process, or I should say the assessment process, as well as some practical implementation and validation guidance. Really, it's just do a gap analysis and measure what you got, and then go from there. Okay, so some final thoughts. As you and your teams are working through this, I think it's really important to remember, as you're meeting it, as you're building all this stuff out, you want to build sustainable processes for maintaining compliance. CMMC is not going to go away. Things don't really disappear. They just kind of morph or change in time. But you'll want to make sure that, hey, yes, we're doing these things, and we can do it again over and over and over again, either with the same team or teams change. And so you'll want to be prepared for that. And then you'll want to train and teach your team on, hey, what are these CMMC requirements? If your organization uses cybersecurity framework, for example, and that's the framework that you follow, CMMC doesn't directly translate to it, but you'll have to Work with your teams and train them so they understand what the CMMC requirements are and how your organization can map what it is that you guys do to these requirements specific to your CMMC environment. So make sure all of that is documented and that flows well within your teams, and then perform regular self-assessments. So you don't have to self-assess yourself. This is outside of your certification self-assessments. This is just best practices in the cybersecurity sphere or community, whatever. Do a regular self-assessment. Pick a handful of controls, or I should say security requirements in this case. So pick a handful of security requirements, like 30 security requirements every year, and just walk through them and make sure, hey, they're good. Or once a quarter, you're doing a subset of them to make sure, hey, yes, we are doing all the right things and we are maintaining our artifacts. Because artifacts get old. That's one thing that's going to happen. You'll get their certification, and then 2 years from now, nobody will have done anything, or nobody will have documented or updated. We had this configuration artifact, and we did it 2 years ago, but since then we've upgraded 17 times. And now this doesn't quite match. We have a GUI from 3 years ago. We cannot submit that again. Are we doing all the right things? So this is to help keep things from falling through the cracks. And yes, this goes on with the next thing. Document everything clearly for your future assessments. So get through this hard push now to get certified. And then it's just, hey, we can just sustain. Your team can sustain, your team can do it, you guys will make it. It's way easier to maintain than it is to start from scratch again. All right, so thank you for joining me for this comprehensive review of CMMC. Best way to support the channel is to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much. Out here.